Who's winning the console war? Is it Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo? Are you a Halo fan, an Uncharted fan, or do you love all those reskinned Nintendo IPs? Regardless of where your allegiances lie, we're going to look at the individual markets across the whole globe and see who's currently winning in the console race and who might win based on future projections. Let's start off by looking at the gaming landscape of the globe. We're talking about a $1 billion industry here.
$1 million isn't cool. You know what's cool?
$1 billion.
Back in 2019, the gaming industry was about $151 billion. And it's projected to grow at a 9% rate until 2025, where it'll be valued at around $257 billion. Now that worth is spread out across the globe. Now, if we're looking at global gamers by region, Asia is dominating the market. And then if you cut that roughly in half, you're looking at Europe as the second biggest market in the gaming industry. And if you cut that in half again, you're looking at the numbers of North America. Now, Latin America beats out North America in numbers of gamers, but we're also talking about mobile gamers in these numbers. So there are a large amount of people who do play mobile games, and they're included in this estimate. Plus, these numbers aren't showing you per capita. So in countries like Asia, there are a lot more people than in North America. So it's understandable that that market is dominant because of the number of people that live there. And we're looking specifically at the total numbers in these regions. Looking at a brief history of the top 3 gaming console competitors currently, Nintendo first came out with their NES, their Nintendo Entertainment System. Now in Japan, it was released as the Famicom in July of 1983. And then Sony entered the discussion about a decade later with its PlayStation, which was released in 1994 in Japan, and then it was released in 1995 in the United States. And then you roughly get 6 years later, Microsoft enters the gaming space in November of 2001 with its Xbox video game console, which put itself in direct competition with PlayStation 2 and the Nintendo GameCube. Now, from what we see in those numbers, we know the Xbox did well in competing against the GameCube. Now, the GameCube, was it a bad console? Meh. Did it have one of the best controllers? Yes. I guess it also depends on the game, but if you're a Super Smash fan, you know that's the controller to go with. Now, people would categorize Sony and Microsoft as the more direct competitors because of their product offerings, their games, and their just similarities with their consoles. So let's look at those two and compare. Now, when the Xbox was first released, it did have to compete with the best-selling console of all time. It made a big impact, but it had a lot of market share to cut out. And they did just that with the release of the Xbox 360. So the next-gen consoles came very close to beating out the PlayStation 3 in terms of total sales. That growth was lost with the wave of the next-gen consoles with the PS4 and Xbox One. But now let's bring Nintendo back in the mix and look at total console sales, excluding the current new consoles. As I said before, the PS2 is the all-time console champion, but then you got the Nintendo coming in and dominating the handheld space. Sony and Nintendo have a huge following, and guess what? To no surprise to anyone, they're both based in the largest gaming market in the world, Asia. Sony is located in Tokyo, Japan, and Nintendo is based out of Kyoto, Japan. And Asia dominates the gaming market. So naturally, we're seeing them consistently win each generation of the console war in terms of total console sales. As you can see, Microsoft comes in at number 9 in total sales with the Xbox 360. That red ring of death didn't keep this console from making a splash. But now, let's look at the current generation of consoles. You got the PS5, Xbox Series X, and the Nintendo Switch. Also, with the Nintendo Switch OLED, new variations that are coming out with each of the consoles now. In Japan, we have Nintendo dominating the sales. This is also due to Nintendo being more readily available than PS5 in terms of supply. But in the EU market, PlayStation 5 is dominating, with Xbox closing in on the Switch. The best market for the Xbox Series X is, of course, the US, where it originated. But even then, they're still being beat out by Switch and the PS5. And when looking at global sales, PS5 and the Switch are neck and neck, with the Xbox Series X losing out primarily because of the Asian markets like Japan. Now we're going to look at the 2021 market share for each of these gaming companies. You can see the two Japanese companies are still holding steady as they have been over the past 2 decades. However, Sony has been having supply chain issues, and based on Microsoft's recent acquisitions with Activision and Blizzard, 2 of the bigger gaming companies out there, we have these companies like DFC Intelligence estimating that in 2025, Microsoft will be taking a larger portion of that market share, making it a much closer race for the console wars. But until we realistically see that movement, Sony is still the champion, and it looks like it will be over the next several years. But Microsoft is making some smart moves with their acquisitions and is going to be heavily competitive in the coming years. Nintendo still has a robust number of IPs that keep them as a threat for the foreseeable future. But for now, Sony takes the cake in terms of global sales and global dominance of the gaming community. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe and tell your friends about me.